Romeo and Juliet. You know this play, of course you do. It's baked into our cultural consciousness as the way that stories of romance are told. You know the plot, more or less. You know some of the characters. You even know some of the lines. But when you forget what you know and look fresh at this text, you're going to find all kinds of things have been hidden there. Welcome to All Strut No Fret. I'm Dr. Anna Camerali, and we're going to uncover some of those hidden secrets buried in this most famous of plays. Many people are told about or taught Romeo and Juliet quite early in life, and while it's wonderful that this provides such an exciting and alluring entry point to Shakespeare, you miss out a lot that way because there's no way teaching younger children about this play. You're going to go into the elements of sensuality, of carnality, of the perpetual tension between life and death. We never teach children in school situations about things like the way the play is entirely positioned as seizing life while being held in the jaws of death. So even though this is the play that you know, I'm now going to ask you to forget what you know in order for us to dig in and uncover some extraordinary depths, tensions, revelations that can be found when you dig right into the depths of the text. For this reason, there's a content note on this particular video. I will be talking explicitly about sexual activity and about genitalia, so if that doesn't work for you for some reason, skip ahead to the next video where I'll be back to just talking about kissing. If you haven't yet looked at the first set of videos on Henry V in this series, I suggest you do that first because that's where I introduce you to this series of 5 steps which cover the whole of my approach. In this particular video, we'll just be recapping the first 2. So number 1, who is speaking to whom? And step 2, which of the notes will help me, which in this case is going to involve looking at some of the archaic language and some of the references and humour that you wouldn't recognise if you have only modern reference points. I strongly suggest you go in and make yourself a little list or a flowchart of some kind of who is in each scene, because this entire play is about people who really understand and let their lives be governed by who is part of their crew and who is the other guys. This makes it a real shortcut to understanding a scene if you understand who's functioning within it because of these 2 opposing houses set up. For example, the play begins with 2 groups of servants, but we immediately are shown that they are Capulets and Montagues in opposition. And then we follow Benvolio rather than initially Romeo. But you see the difference between how he interacts with Tybalt versus how he interacts with Romeo. Here are our main players, and you can see the ones we need to know most on both sides here, the Capulets and the Montagues, but also those who fit into neither camp, but who have established relationships either predominantly with one side or the other, or as mediators between the two. Now let's go on to talk about how reading the notes in this play is going to change your life, because that's where the layers of richness lie that you can excavate through understanding the various forms of archaic language and often very obscure jokes that tell you a lot about character. For example, Mercutio. Are you aware that Mercutio only appears in 4 scenes? His presence when he's on stage is so powerful that it's easy not to realise how rarely he appears. But let's unpack some of the specifics of his personality, which you can do through uncovering some of the archaic language and references that he uses. We all understand that Mercutio is funny, but he's not nice funny. He's not good, clean, gentle, Mary Jess and Japes funny. His humour is perpetually crude and cruel, and he jokes in the way that people joke when they're angry and bitter and in some kind of pain. And I think that gives rise to the largely modern, frequently used interpretation that he is actually profoundly in love with Romeo and doesn't know how to cope with the hurt of the fact that that his eyes are only for the girls. You can see he's willing to make the crudest of sexual jokes, and also that his jokes about women are always about what whores they are, what harlots, what useful orifices for penetration, but no more. He jokes without respect and without kindness. A prominent example is when he imagines Romeo sitting under a tree wishing that his girlfriend would like to have anal intercourse. The medlar was a very common fruit in the Elizabethan kitchen garden, but it wasn't edible until it began to rot, so it's representative both of rotting and of, well, its suggestive shape. But don't believe it when the notes tell you that people thought it looked like female genitalia. If you want to talk about vaginas, then it's all about pomegranates. When you're talking about medlars, it is definitely the orifice that is shared between both genders. And the giveaway has got to be that the other name of the medlar fruit was actually the open arse. So there you go. What do we get out of this? Well, we get that while Romeo is off swooning around being romantic, Mercutio only wants to make crude jokes about the fact that women are rotten orifices suitable for sticking your popper and pear in. For a somewhat nicer example of how knowing about the full range of references that people understood in this period, we're going to look at a portion of one of Juliet's speeches. On the topic of the notes helping us get the most out of archaic imagery, there's one more line I want to look at closely that will help us with a speech we're going to look at in more detail in the final of these 3 videos, the Gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds, and we're going to talk about falconry. I would just like to talk about this one line, "Hood my unmanned blood baiting in my cheeks." It's in the middle of the speech, in the middle of a conceit where we're seeing nighttime portrayed as a woman, as a matron. So therefore a married woman, a woman who understands about what married women do in the night. She's presented as a woman wearing a black mantle that can be, a mantle being a veil, that can be brought down to cover whatever it is that Romeo and Juliet are intending to do. But right in the middle of that, there's this one line, this "Hood my unmanned blood baiting in my cheeks," and that is pure falconry imagery, because falcons were kept hooded until you fly them, and so their most common state was to be kept with a veil, if you like. There was a little hood that went over the head. But also her falcons were spoken of as being manned when they are trained. But of course for Juliet, she is waiting to be manned in a different way. And the blood baiting in her cheeks, so she's describing the flush of excitement in her cheeks. The baiting reference is still sticking to that idea of the falcon, because falcons, when they get frightened or excited or want to protest at what's happening to them, do something called baiting, which is beating their wings very, very fast, flapping them downwards. And the flutter in her heart and pulse in her blood and the flush in her cheeks, to her all feels like that movement of the excited, untamed falcon that is in effect waiting to be tamed by the one who will man her. So just in that one tiny simple little line, "Hood my unmanned blood baiting in my cheeks," there's this whole world of imagery that speaks much more directly than if she were to say my cheeks are flushed, my heart is pounding. She can do that so much more effectively by making us think about this beautiful bird that cannot really be contained. When we go into the second video of the 3 parts for Romeo and Juliet, we'll be recapping what you can get out of reading the last word of each line. And in order to get there, we'll be revisiting the fundamental question about whether we're working with verse or with prose, and we'll be really digging into what verse can do for us when that appears in the plays.